Nathan Cross sat in the back seat as the luxury car rolled forward through the thick stream of traffic. Tinted windows, a hush of an engine. Just another street he would have never bothered to notice. But then he saw the little girl, a child, maybe 6 years old, kneeling beside a trash bin, her bare hands trembling, her shoes torn open. She carefully picked up plastic bottles one by one, then wiped them clean on her sleeve. "Slow down," Nathan said softly. Across the sidewalk, a woman with light brown hair, thin and worn to the bone, held a sack that was already half full as she waited. The little girl ran back to her mother, beaming like she'd just found treasure. "Well done, sweetheart," the mother whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Something tightened in Nathan's chest, a kind of discomfort, a memory he didn't want to touch. Then the girl laughed. That laugh cut straight through him. That laugh. He had heard it before, 7 years earlier, in a hospital room he never should have been able to walk out of. All at once, the little girl lifted her head and looked directly at the black car. In a single heartbeat, the whole city disappeared. Those eyes, that dimple on her left cheek, that same curious tilt of the head. Nathan's hand went rigid on the door handle, because the last time he had seen a child with that face, a doctor had told him the little girl's heart had stopped beating. And yet here she was, digging through trash, smiling at her mother, alive. Stay with me until the end of this video, because the truth about that little girl will tear open a past Nathan Cross thought he had buried forever. Before we begin, if you love stories that reach deep into the heart like this one, please tap like to support me. Don't forget to share this video with the people you care about, and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the stories to come. Now, let's begin. Nathan Cross. That name alone made the whole city lower its eyes. At 37, he controlled an underground empire stretching across 3 states. From the darkest streets to the most dazzling skyscrapers, money flowed through his hands like water. Politicians answered his calls before they answered their wives. Enemies vanished without leaving a trace. In the underworld, Nathan Cross's word was law, and his law allowed no exceptions. People called him by many names: the boss, the shadow, the reaper. But the name used most often, the name even cold-blooded hitmen whispered to one another in fear, was the man with no heart. Because Nathan Cross never hesitated, never showed mercy, never let emotion steer a single decision. He could sit across from someone who had once been his closest friend, look him straight in the eye, and order his execution without blinking. He could read a report about a brutal blood-soaked purge while slowly sipping a glass of red wine, as if he were scanning the weather. His heart, if it still existed at all, had turned to stone long ago. At least, that was what everyone believed. But Nathan hadn't always been this way. 7 years earlier, he had been a different man. Still dangerous, still powerful. But there had still been light in those cold eyes. He knew how to laugh. He knew how to love. He knew how to hope. 7 years ago, Nathan Cross had a reason to live beyond power and money. He had Emma, a tiny little daughter with eyes as clear as an autumn lake, and a bright, pure laugh that could chase away any darkness inside him. Emma was his angel, his light, the only thing in this world that made Nathan Cross, the Lord of the Shadows, feel like he deserved to be called human. But then Emma was gone, and when that small coffin was lowered into the cold earth, Nathan buried everything with her. Love, hope, smiles, a heart. He buried it all alongside his daughter, then sealed it under a layer of ice so thick that nothing could ever break through. And Nathan Cross became the name the entire underworld fears today. 7 years. 7 years he lived like a machine. He woke up, ran his empire, destroyed his enemies, returned to his freezing, silent mansion, and repeated, no joy, no sorrow, no pain, no emotion, just existence. He married Victoria 2 years after Emma died. A political marriage, as cold as the man he had become. Victoria wanted his money and his status. He needed a woman at his side for social events. No love, no passion. Only a quiet arrangement between 2 people who both understood the rules of the game. Nathan's mansion sat on top of a hill, looking down over the entire city. Vast, luxurious, and so empty it could steal your breath. There was no child's laughter echoing through the long corridors, no small footsteps pattering across the wooden floors, no one calling Daddy when he stepped through the door. Nathan forbade it all. No one was allowed to mention Emma. No one was allowed to display her photographs. Nothing was allowed to exist that could pull him back into the life he once had, because remembering meant pain, and Nathan Cross had forgotten how to endure pain a long time ago. And yet today, sitting inside his luxury car in the middle of a restless crowd, he had seen that face again. That laugh, that gaze, as if Emma had never left, as if the last 7 years had been nothing but a long dream. Nathan's hand was still frozen on the door handle. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand why the heart he believed was dead was now pounding wild inside his chest. He knew only one thing: that little girl. He had to know who she was. 7 years ago, Nathan Cross wasn't the cold kingpin people know today. 7 years ago, he was a father who loved his daughter more than his own life. Emma Cross was born on a rainy night in March, small and fragile like a flower petal. From the very first second he saw her eyes open, Nathan knew his life would never be the same again. She had big, round eyes, clear as crystal, and a dimple on her left cheek whenever she smiled. Emma's first cry rang out in the delivery room, and Nathan, a man who had once ordered killings without his hands even shaking, suddenly felt his vision blur with tears. But that happiness didn't last. When Emma was 6 months old, doctors discovered she had a congenital heart condition. A defect in a heart valve meant that her tiny heart couldn't pump blood normally. At first, the doctors said it could be managed with medication. Nathan hired the best specialists, bought the most expensive medicines, and even built a private medical room inside his mansion to monitor his daughter's health day by day, hour by hour. He believed that with his money and power, nothing was impossible. But Emma's condition kept getting worse. From a lively child, she slowly became frail. Her lips often turned bluish. Her breathing grew heavier with each passing day. There were nights Nathan stayed awake beside her bed, counting every breath she took, terrified that if he fell asleep, she would stop breathing and he wouldn't even know. When Emma turned 5, the doctors told Nathan the brutal truth he didn't want to hear. Her heart was failing. The only way to save Emma was a heart transplant. She needed a new heart. A strong one from a compatible donor. If not, she wouldn't make it through this year. Nathan collapsed. For the first time in his life, he felt his power was completely useless. He could buy an entire city. He could make anyone kneel in front of him. But he couldn't buy a heart for his daughter. He couldn't force someone to die so she could live. Even so, Nathan didn't give up. He contacted every hospital across the United States, then reached out to Europe, to Asia. He spent millions of dollars to put Emma's name at the very top of transplant waiting lists everywhere he could. He hired an entire private medical team on standby 24 hours a day, ready to put her on a plane at any moment if there was news of a matching heart. The months of waiting were hell. Every time the phone rang, Nathan flinched, hoping it was good news. And every time he was disappointed, the wait pressed down harder than before. No matching heart. Emma's rare blood type made the search even more difficult. In those days, Nathan lived in the hospital more than he lived at home. He sat by Emma's bed, reading her fairy tales, forcing a smile when she looked at him with those clear eyes full of trust. Emma didn't know she was dying. She only knew she was sick, and Daddy was trying to make her better. She trusted Nathan completely, believing Daddy could do anything, and that faith killed Nathan a little more each day, because he knew the truth. He knew that with every day that passed, Emma's tiny heart grew a little weaker. He knew time was running out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. There were nights when Emma had finally fallen asleep, and Nathan stepped out into the hospital hallway, leaned his back against the cold wall, and cried. The most powerful kingpin in the city cried like a helpless child. He prayed to a god he didn't believe in. He begged anyone who might be listening. He was willing to trade everything, his empire, his life, his soul, if it meant his daughter could live. But no one answered, and Emma's heart kept weakening. Her bouts of breathlessness came more and more often. Her fainting spells grew longer and longer. The doctors told Nathan, in a low, heavy voice, that they had done everything they could. Now it was only a matter of time. Nathan remembered the moment he heard those words. He remembered the feeling as if someone had pulled all the air out of his lungs. He remembered his legs giving out right there in the hospital corridor, and he couldn't get back up. His daughter was going to die, and he couldn't save her. It was the first time in Nathan Cross's life he tasted true helplessness. And it was also the beginning of the end. Emma's final night came on a Friday in October. Outside the hospital window, the city was still alive, neon lights blazing and pulsing, but inside that small room, the air was so heavy it felt like it could crush anyone who tried to breathe. For 3 days before that, Emma was barely awake. She drifted in and out of a fevered haze, opening her eyes for a few seconds at a time before slipping away again. The machines beeped in steady rhythm, tracking each fragile beat of a tiny heart that was slowly giving up the fight. Nathan didn't leave the room for even a single step. He sat beside her bed, gripping that little hand inside his own, as if the moment he let go, she would slip out of reach forever. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He didn't speak to anyone. He only sat there, staring at his daughter's pale face, praying for a miracle he knew would never come. Then, that night, something strange happened. Around 9 o'clock, as Nathan slumped against the edge of the bed, half awake and half lost in a dream, he felt the small hand in his move. He jerked his head up, and his heart nearly stopped when he saw Emma's eyes open, looking straight at him. But they weren't the dull, exhausted eyes of the days before. That night, Emma's eyes were strangely clear, shining bright, as if she had never been sick at all. A smile bloomed on her pale lips, and the dimple on her left cheek appeared as sharply as it had when she was healthy. "Daddy." Emma's voice was soft, but unnaturally clear. Nathan leaned closer, tears already rising before he even realized it. "Sweetheart, how do you feel?" "I don't hurt." Emma smiled, her tiny fingers squeezing his hand. "Daddy, don't cry. I want to tell Daddy something important." Nathan swallowed hard, fighting the sob lodged in his throat. He nodded, ready to listen to anything she wanted to say, even if it was her last. Emma was quiet for a moment, those clear eyes drifting toward something far away, as if she were seeing something Nathan couldn't see. Then she looked back at him, her expression strangely serious for a 5-year-old. "Daddy, there's another little girl who looks a lot like me." Nathan blinked, not understanding. "What little girl, sweetheart?" "I don't know her name." Emma spoke slowly, as if she were trying to deliver something that mattered more than anything else. "But she looks like me. So much. And she needs Daddy." Nathan felt his throat tighten. He thought it had to be the medication, a hallucination brought on by drugs. Morphine. The strong painkillers the doctors had been giving Emma for days had to be making her delirious. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her tiny fingers. "What are you talking about, Emma? Are you dreaming?" "Not a dream, Daddy." Emma shook her head, her eyes bright with a strange certainty. "She's real, and one day, Daddy will find her. Daddy has to promise me. Promise that Daddy will save her, the way Daddy tried to save me." Nathan didn't know what to say. He only nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I promise, sweetheart. I promise." Emma smiled, satisfied. That smile was so radiant, Nathan almost believed she was getting better, almost believed the last miracle had finally arrived. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too," Nathan whispered, his voice breaking apart. More than anything, Emma closed her eyes, the smile still resting on her lips. Nathan thought she was only sleeping. He sat there all night, holding her hand, listening to the steady sound of the machines, waiting for morning to come so she would wake up once more. But Emma never woke again. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, the steady beeping of the heart monitor suddenly turned into one long, flat, piercing tone. A straight line. Emma's heart had stopped. Nathan screamed for the doctors. He begged them to do something, but it was all useless. His little angel was gone, leaving him alone in the dark. And the strange prophecy she had spoken the night before was buried with her, dismissed by Nathan as the final hallucination of a dying child. Until 7 years later, when he saw a little girl picking through trash on the side of the road with a face identical to Emma's, and those words rang in his mind like a bell. After Emma's funeral, Nathan Cross vanished from the world for 2 weeks. No one knew where he was. No calls were answered. No orders were given. His underground empire swayed in confusion, and his enemies began to stir, thinking the boss had collapsed completely. They were wrong. When Nathan returned, he wasn't the man he had been before. The light in his eyes was gone. His smile was dead. His voice had turned cold as steel. Nathan Cross came back with the fury of a wounded animal, and he poured all his pain onto anyone who dared challenge him. Within 6 months, he wiped out 3 rival gangs. No mercy, no negotiation, no witnesses left behind. The people who thought they could take advantage of his weakness learned the most fatal lesson of their lives. Nathan wasn't weak. He had become more dangerous than ever, because he had nothing left to lose. He didn't fear death. He didn't fear pain. He didn't fear anything, because the only thing he had ever been afraid to lose had already been taken from him. And a man with nothing left to fear is a man no one can stop. 2 years after Emma was gone, Nathan married Victoria Ashford. It wasn't a wedding for love. Victoria was the daughter of a powerful senator, a connection that could give Nathan the political protection he needed to expand his empire. Victoria wanted money and status. Nathan needed a flawless cover. They both understood exactly what this arrangement was, and neither of them pretended it was anything other than an exchange of benefit. The wedding was lavish, grand, filled with hundreds of the most powerful guests in the city, but there wasn't a real smile on the groom's lips. There was no tenderness in his eyes when he looked at the bride. Nathan did everything like a machine, completing each ritual with perfect precision, and no soul. And when the wedding night ended, he lay beside his new wife and felt emptier than he ever had before. Nathan's mansion was redesigned completely after he married. Everything connected to Emma was cleared away. Her room was locked tight, and no one was allowed to step inside. Her photographs were placed in a safe, hidden away from sight. The toys she had once loved were packed into boxes and moved to a secret storage place whose address only Nathan knew. He ordered everyone in the house, from Victoria to the servants, that no one was to speak Emma's name in his presence. Not ever, for any reason. Anyone who broke that rule would be fired immediately. Or worse, if they belonged to his organization. The mansion became a palace of ice. Vast, luxurious, and cold down to the bone. No laughter echoed through the empty rooms. No children ran down the endless corridors. Only a heavy silence, and the footsteps of the people living there, moving like ghosts. Victoria learned quickly how to survive in Nathan's world. She didn't ask about his past. She didn't try to push into the forbidden places inside his soul. She lived her own life, spending his money, attending high society parties, and playing the role of the perfect wife when it was required. Beyond that, they were like strangers under the same roof. 7 years passed like that. 7 years Nathan Cross lived inside the shell of ice he had built around himself. He believed he had buried the past for good. He believed he had forgotten Emma. He believed his heart was completely dead, and nothing could ever wake it again. Until the day he saw that little girl picking through trash on the side of the road, wearing his daughter's face. Back in the present, Nathan was still sitting there in the luxury car, his hand frozen on the door handle, his eyes locked on the little girl picking through trash by the roadside. 7 years of memories crashed over him like a tidal wave, drowning him in images he thought he had buried long ago. Emma's face, Emma's smile, Emma's laugh. All of it was right there in front of him, so vivid it stole his breath, living inside the body of a stranger child digging through garbage to survive. Danny, his driver and most trusted bodyguard, glanced into the rearview mirror with growing unease. He'd worked for Nathan for 10 years, long enough to know his boss never acted out of character. Nathan Cross was always calm, always calculating, always in control. But the man in the back seat right now didn't look like the Nathan Danny knew. His boss's gaze was trembling. His boss's hand was clenched so hard his knuckles had gone white. And on the face that was usually ice cold, there was an emotion Danny hadn't seen in 7 years. "Boss, we've got the meeting with the Columbia delegation in 20 minutes. Danny kept his voice careful. "This deal is worth $8 million. They flew in from Miami just to see you." Nathan didn't answer. He didn't even look like he'd heard a word Danny said. His eyes stayed on the little girl, tracking every small movement. The way she bent to pick up a bottle, the way she wiped each one clean, the way she ran back to her mother with that radiant smile. Every motion was familiar in a way that hurt. "Boss," Danny tried again, more worried now. "Cancel the meeting." Nathan's voice came out low and final. Danny thought he'd misheard. He turned fully around, staring at his boss with wide eyes. "Boss, what did you say?" "The meeting with Columbia. Cancel it," Nathan repeated, without a flicker of hesitation. "Call Marcus. Tell him to handle it. Tell them there's an emergency. Reschedule for next week. Or next month. Whatever they want. But boss, this is the biggest deal of the year." Danny tried to push back. "If we cancel at the last minute like this, they'll think we don't respect them. It could blow up the relationship we've been building for months." Nathan turned his head, and the look he gave Danny made the driver fall silent instantly. That was the look of Nathan Cross, the boss the entire Underworld feared. A look that could force even the most seasoned killers to drop their eyes. "When I say cancel, I mean cancel." Nathan spoke slowly, each word carved like it was being cut into stone. "Don't make me say it a third time." Danny swallowed, nodding fast. "Yes, boss, I understand. I'll call Marcus right now." He pulled out his phone and started dialing, his voice shaking as he spoke. Meanwhile, Nathan turned back to the window. The little girl and her mother were still there, about 50 meters from the car. They were nearly finished collecting, the sack now stuffed full of plastic bottles and aluminum cans. The woman looked exhausted, her thin shoulders bent under the weight of the bag, but she still tried to smile at her daughter. "Park," Nathan gave another order. "Follow them. I want to know where they go, where they live, who they are." "It's not now." Danny had just finished the call with Marcus, and he looked at his boss with a face full of questions. But he didn't dare ask. In their world, asking too much could get you killed. He only pulled the car quietly to the curb, shut off the engine, and waited. Nathan sat perfectly still, his eyes never leaving the two strangers. He didn't understand what he was doing. He didn't understand why a little girl picking through trash could make him cancel an $8 million deal without even a second thought. He didn't understand why the heart he believed was dead was now pounding wildly in his chest, as if it wanted to break free. He only knew he couldn't leave. He couldn't turn away from that little girl. He couldn't pretend he hadn't seen that face, because it was Emma's face. And even if his mind told him it was impossible, that Emma had died 7 years ago, that there was no way his daughter could be standing here now, his heart was screaming something else. His heart was telling him this wasn't some random coincidence. 20 minutes passed. Nathan still sat motionless in the car, watching every step the little girl and her mother took. They were nearly finished. The sack, swollen with plastic bottles, was tied tight. The brown-haired woman straightened up, rubbing her lower back with exhaustion, then said something to her daughter. The girl nodded eagerly, hugging the last plastic bottle she just found, then turned and ran toward her mother. It happened in an instant. A broken piece of brick lay right in the middle of the sidewalk, where the girl didn't see it because she was focused on her mother. Her torn shoes weren't enough to protect her small feet. The tip of her shoe snagged on the brick, and she pitched forward onto ground hard as stone. A cry split the afternoon air. Nathan didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't weigh whether this made any sense. His instinct moved before his reason could step in. The car door flew open. Expensive leather shoes hit the filthy sidewalk, and Nathan Cross, the most powerful boss in the city, was running toward a trash-collecting little girl he had never met. "Boss," Danny shouted after him, panic rising in his voice. "Boss, what are you doing?" But Nathan didn't hear him. He didn't hear anything except the girl's crying, so eerily close to Emma's cry whenever she got hurt. He reached her in seconds, dropped to his knees beside her without caring that his $1,000 suit was brushing against dirty ground. The girl was pushing herself upright, both hands pressed to the pavement, her knee scraped and bleeding. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she bit her lip hard, trying not to sob out loud. Brave. Tough. Just like Emma. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice rough with emotion. The girl lifted her head to look at him, and Nathan's world stopped turning. Close, so close he could count every eyelash. So close he could see every smallest detail of that face. And every detail was Emma's. So perfectly that it made him want to scream. Big, round eyes, deep brown like honey, framed by long, curled lashes. Emma had eyes like that. A small, delicate nose, slightly turned up at the tip. Emma had a nose like that. Heart-shaped lips, pressed tight now as she fought back tears. Emma had lips like that. And the dimple on her left cheek, deep and clear, appearing every time her face moved. Emma had that exact dimple. Nathan felt like he couldn't breathe. This wasn't the vague kind of resemblance you might see in any child. This was a match down to the millimeter, as if someone had copied Emma's face and placed it onto another child. As if Emma had come back to life. "I'm okay, sir." The girl's voice pulled Nathan out of the shock. She looked at him with curious eyes. Her head tilted slightly to one side. "It's just a scraped knee. It doesn't hurt much." That voice, clear and sweet, every word pronounced so carefully. Emma spoke like that too. "Are you sure?" Nathan asked, his voice trembling so much he hated himself for it. "Let me see your knee." The girl obediently stretched her leg out, showing the scrape with a few beads of blood still seeping out. It wasn't serious, but it had to hurt. And yet she didn't cry. She just looked at it with a calm that was almost unbelievable, as if this kind of thing happened all the time. "My mom says when it hurts, I have to be strong." "Arde." The girl said it as if she could read Nathan's thoughts. "Because if I cry, Mom will worry. And Mom already has a lot to worry about." Something tightened in Nathan's chest. A 6-year-old thinking about not making her mother worry, while her knee was bleeding. That kind of maturity, that kind of care, it shouldn't exist in someone so small. It only shows up in children who have had to grow up too fast, children who have seen too much hardship. "You're a very brave little girl." "Talbot." Nathan spoke softly, and he meant it. The girl smiled, and the dimple in her left cheek appeared, deep and unmistakable. That smile, God, that smile. It was so much like Emma's that Nathan wanted to cry right there, on the filthy sidewalk, in front of a stranger child. Nathan stayed on his knees beside the little girl, unable to tear his eyes away from that face. A face so painfully like Emma's. He realized he was trembling, and the realization stunned him. Nathan Cross, the man who had faced gunfire without blinking, was shaking in front of a 6-year-old child. "What's your name?" he asked, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Sophia," the girl answered, her voice bright and clear. "Sophia." Nathan repeated the name, tasting it as it left his mouth. A beautiful name, a name that meant wisdom. "How old are you, Sophia?" "I'm 6. I'll be 7 in a few months. Mom says she'll make me a birthday cake if we have enough money." It's a not a bit. That innocent sentence cut into Nathan like a knife. 6 years old, born about 9 months after Emma was gone. This couldn't be random. While Nathan sank into his thoughts, Sophia suddenly pulled something small out of her pocket. "Sir, look," she said, excited. "This is my car." Nathan looked down at what Sophia was holding. A plastic toy car, old and faded, missing a wheel. But what caught Nathan's attention was the way the missing wheel had been replaced with a small white button, carefully tied on with thread. Handmade. Creative. A simple solution to a problem most kids would only cry about and demand a new toy for. "My mom fixed it for me," Sophia explained, her eyes shining with pride. "I found this car in the trash last week, but it was missing a wheel. Mom said we don't have money to buy a new car, but she could fix it. It's not every-oded, and she used her own button to make me a new wheel. My mom is really good." Nathan stared at the patched-up toy car, and something tightened in his throat. A mother cutting a button off her own clothes to repair her child's toy. A child treating a car pulled from a trash bin like treasure. How poor did their life have to be? "My mom says when you help someone, good things come back to you," Sophia went on, her sincerity so pure it made Nathan want to close his eyes. "Maybe that's why you helped me today." "Because I helped Mom pick up bottles all day." Nathan didn't know what to say. He, the man who always had an answer for every situation, was silent in front of the simple life philosophy of a 6-year-old girl. Then Sophia did something that turned Nathan's world inside out. She slipped her hand into her pocket again and pulled out a small photograph, wrinkled and faded from being handled too many times. She glanced toward her mother, as if making sure her mom wasn't looking, then leaned close to Nathan and whispered like she was sharing a huge secret. "I'll show you something, but don't tell anyone. Mom doesn't like it when I talk about this." Nathan nodded, not understanding what was happening. Sophia carefully unfolded the photo, smoothing the creases with the kind of reverence you'd use for something priceless. Then she held it up in front of Nathan. "This is my real daddy. Identita," she whispered, her eyes bright with a fragile hope. "Mom says Daddy had to go far away before I was born. But I keep Daddy's picture, and I believe one day I'll meet Daddy." Nathan looked down at the photo, and the blood in his veins turned to ice. Staring back at him from that wrinkled photograph was his own face, younger by 7 years. Fewer lines, less cold, but unmistakable. It was Nathan Cross, in a black suit, standing at a charity fundraiser he had attended for Emma. He remembered this picture. It had been taken at the hospital where Emma was being treated, during a fundraiser for children with heart disease. He'd gone because he wanted to donate money to the hospital, because he wanted them to have more resources to save children like his daughter. But why was this photo in the hands of a little girl who picked through trash? Why was she calling him Daddy? Why? "Do you know my daddy?" Sophia's voice pulled Nathan out of his shock. She looked at him with eyes full of hope. "Mom says Daddy is a very important person. Mom says Daddy doesn't know about me, but I believe Daddy will find me." "Do you think Daddy will find me?" Nathan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to think. His mind was spinning with 1,000 questions that had no answers. "Sophia," the woman's voice called from farther away. "Come here right now." Sophia jumped, quickly stuffing the photo back into her pocket. "I have to go." She spoke fast. "Thank you for helping me." "Oh, what's your name?" "Nathan," he answered, like his voice was coming from very far away. "Your name is Nathan." Sophia smiled, and the dimple appeared again. "Nathan, I'll remember. Goodbye, Mr. Nathan." End quote. Then she turned and ran back to her mother, leaving Nathan kneeling alone on the sidewalk, with a heart shattering into a million pieces. Nathan didn't know how long he'd been kneeling on that sidewalk. Maybe it was a few minutes. Maybe it was an entire century. Time stopped meaning anything when his mind was spinning, churning up fragments of memory he'd buried long ago. The photograph, his own face in the hands of a stranger child, and the way the little girl had called him Daddy. All those pieces were sliding into place inside Nathan's head, forming an image he didn't dare believe could be real. He watched the mother and daughter as they moved farther away, and when his gaze settled on the thin, brown-haired woman, a name suddenly struck his mind like thunder. Grace Sullivan. Memory broke loose like a flooded riverbank, dragging Nathan back 7 years, back to the darkest months of his life. At that time, Emma had been in the hospital for nearly a year. Nathan was exhausted in body and in soul. He almost lived inside the hospital, sleeping on rigid chairs, eating cold meals from the cafeteria, spending every waking moment at his daughter's side. During those days, he wasn't the powerful boss everyone feared. He was only a desperate father, watching his little girl fade a little more each day. And then Grace appeared. She was a new nurse assigned to the pediatric cardiology unit, only 21 years old. with glossy light brown hair and eyes as blue as the sea. Grace wasn't like the other nurses. She didn't fear Nathan the way the others did. She didn't treat Emma like a patient. She treated her like an ordinary child who deserved love. Grace brought Emma new fairy tale books every week. She sat for hours beside the bed, reading in a gentle voice. She brought extra blankets on cold nights. She sang lullabies when Emma couldn't sleep. And she always found a way to make the little girl laugh, even on the most painful days. Emma adored Grace. She called her a fairy, because a fairy always brought joy and chased sadness away. And Nathan, no matter how hard he tried to keep his distance, couldn't help being drawn to her. Grace was the only light in the darkness that had swallowed his life back then. She was the only person who made him feel less alone in that hopeless battle. She didn't look at him with fear, like everyone else. She looked at him with understanding and with compassion. She knew who he was. She knew the underworld he controlled. But she also saw the grieving father inside the armor of power. Their connection began one late night, when Nathan sat alone in the hospital corridor, his head bowed in despair. Grace found him, sat down beside him, and said nothing at all. She simply stayed there, silent, letting him know he wasn't alone. And Nathan, for the first time in his life, allowed a woman to see his weakness. After that, they had a few months together. Not a romance of roses and candles, just brief moments between the hours spent caring for Emma, a hand held in an empty hallway, an embrace when no one was watching. A rare night when Nathan let himself be comforted. Grace demanded nothing from him. She understood Nathan's heart belonged to Emma, and she accepted it. She only wanted to be near him. She wanted to give him a place to rest while the storm was drowning his life. But then Emma grew weaker. Her condition worsened quickly, and Nathan panicked. He feared that giving time to Grace would steal his focus from Emma. He feared that loving someone else would make it impossible to survive if he lost his daughter. And in that panic, he did what he was best at. He cut it off. No explanation. No goodbye. Nathan simply stopped seeing Grace. He avoided her in the hospital. He didn't answer her messages. He closed the door in her face, the same way he'd close the door on anyone who tried to get close to him. Grace didn't chase him. She understood. She continued caring for Emma professionally, refusing to let anything personal interfere with her work. And when Emma died, Grace was one of the people who truly cried at the funeral. Nathan saw her standing in the distance, tears streaming down her face. But he didn't go to her. He couldn't. He was in too much pain to face anyone, especially the woman who reminded him of Emma's final days. After the funeral, Grace disappeared from Nathan's life. He didn't look for her. He didn't ask about her. He buried the memory of her alongside everything connected to Emma. And he never knew that when he cut the relationship apart, Grace had been carrying a secret that was standing in front of him now, in the body of a 6-year-old girl with a face identical to Emma's. Nathan rose from the sidewalk, his legs heavy as if stones were tied to them. He turned back to the car, opened the door, and slid into the back seat without a word. Danny watched him in the rearview mirror, his face tight with worry and questions, but he didn't dare ask. "Boss, where are we going now?" Danny asked carefully. Nathan didn't answer right away. He watched the mother and daughter disappearing at the end of the street, the sack of bottles and cans dragging the woman's shoulders down with its weight. That image carved itself into Nathan's mind like a wound that would never heal. "Home," Nathan said, his voice low and dull. "But before that, I need you to do something." "Yes, boss. What do you need?" "Investigate that woman." Nathan spoke slowly, each word weighed and measured. "Grace Sullivan. I want everything on her. Where she lives, her job, her family, medical history, finances, all of it. Don't miss a single detail." Danny nodded, not asking why. In their world, asking why could get you killed. He only followed orders and kept his mouth shut. "Yes, boss. I'll have a report for you tomorrow morning." The car rolled toward the mansion on the hill, but Nathan didn't see anything around him. His mind was somewhere else, spinning through memories and questions with no answers. Sophia, 6 years old, born around 7 years ago. The same time he cut Grace off. The same time Emma died. Could it be possible? Had Grace been pregnant without him knowing? Was Sophia really his daughter? And if she was, why had Grace never said a word? When the car stopped at the mansion gate, Nathan stepped out like a machine. He walked through the grand doors, climbed the stairs, and slammed his office door shut. He didn't want to see anyone. He didn't want to speak to anyone. He only wanted to be alone with the thoughts tearing his mind apart. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, a glass of whiskey in his hand that had gone cold long ago. Moonlight slid through the window, washing the room in a pale, ghostly glow. And in that silence, Emma's words from 7 years earlier echoed in his mind, clear as if she were sitting right beside him. "Daddy, there's another little girl who looks a lot like me. She needs Daddy. Bud. And one day, Daddy will find her." For 7 years, Nathan had pushed those words away. He'd called them the hallucination of a dying child, a side effect of morphine, anything except the truth. But now, after seeing Sophia, after seeing a face so terrifyingly identical to Emma's down to the smallest detail, after seeing his own photograph in the child's hands, Nathan wasn't sure anymore. Had Emma known? Had she somehow sensed Sophia's existence before she went? Had it not been delirium at all, but a real prophecy? A thin thread of hope flared inside Nathan's chest, an emotion he'd believed had died long ago. If Sophia was truly his daughter, then it meant a piece of him still existed in this world. It meant he hadn't lost everything. It meant he could be a father again. "Nathan." Victoria's voice came from the doorway, pulling him out of his spiraling thoughts. She stood there in a silk nightgown, blonde hair spilling over her shoulders, her expression a mix of curiosity and irritation. "I heard you canceled the meeting with Columbia. What happened?" Nathan looked at his wife, and he felt nothing. No love. No hatred. Just emptiness. "Nothing. It's nothing," he answered coldly. "Business. It doesn't concern you." Victoria frowned, clearly unhappy with that. "You came home late, canceled an important meeting, and you're sitting in the dark alone. Don't tell me it's nothing." Nathan set his glass down on the desk, the sound of glass against wood sharp and dry. "When I say it's nothing, I mean it's nothing." He stared straight into Victoria's eyes, his voice ice cold. "Now you can go to sleep. I need to be alone." I guess evaded. Victoria stayed there a few seconds longer, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she only turned and walked away, closing the door behind her. Nathan didn't watch her go. He turned back to the window, where moonlight spilled over the city below. Somewhere out there, in a shelter or a dark corner of the street, his daughter was sleeping, and Nathan Cross wouldn't rest until he knew the truth. The next morning came earlier than Nathan wanted. He hadn't slept a single minute. He'd only sat in his office and waited. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, there was a knock at the door. Danny walked in with a thick file in his hands. His trusted driver looked pale, as if what he'd found had kept him awake as much as it had kept his boss awake. "Boss, I've got the report." Danny's voice had dropped lower. "But I've got to warn you. What's in here isn't easy to read." Nathan held out his hand without saying a word. Danny placed the file into his palm, then stepped back and waited in silence. Nathan opened the folder, and each page he turned felt like a blade cutting into his chest. Grace Sullivan, 28 years old. Former nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, pediatric cardiology. Nathan looked at the attached photograph, and his heart twisted. It was Grace from 7 years ago, with clear blue eyes and a warm smile. But the woman he'd seen on the sidewalk yesterday looked at least 10 years older than this photo. Life had drained her dry. He kept reading. Grace's parents died in a car accident when she was 19. She became an orphan overnight, forced to shoulder a massive debt her parents left behind. She studied and worked at the same time, grinding herself down to become a nurse, to build a stable life. And then she met Nathan, and everything changed. After Nathan cut off contact, Grace discovered she was pregnant. She gave birth to Sophia alone, with no one beside her. No family, no close friends, no father for the child. She raised her daughter alone for 6 years, working night shifts and day shifts just to keep them afloat. Things held together, barely, until 18 months ago. Nathan turned to the next page, and his hand started to shake. 18 months ago, St. Mary's Hospital cut staff due to budget shortages. Grace was on the list. She lost her job at the worst possible time. At the same time, she discovered a lump in her breast during a routine checkup. The doctor said it was malignant. She needed surgery immediately, but with no insurance, no job, and no savings, Grace did what any mother would do. She delayed treatment to save money for her daughter. Something tightened in Nathan's throat. A woman carrying a malignant tumor, dying a little more each day, and still putting her child first. Still choosing for Sophia to have milk to drink instead of choosing treatment for herself. He kept reading, and every line felt like a slap across his face. 8 months ago, Grace was evicted from her apartment because she couldn't pay rent. She packed what she could into an old car and lived in it with Sophia. They slept in the backseat. They washed up in public bathrooms. They ate the cheapest food they could find. 6 weeks ago, the car was towed by police for illegal parking. Grace didn't have the money to get it back. She lost the last moving roof she had. With no other choice, she brought Sophia to the Riverside Shelter, a place for homeless women and children. The shelter was overcrowded. Some nights, the two of them had to sleep out in the hallway because there was no room inside. Some nights, they had to walk to a nearby church and beg for a place to stay. Some nights, they slept on a park bench, curled up in the cold. Nathan reached the final page, and the sentence there made him close his eyes. Grace Sullivan is currently visiting an unregulated plasma center twice a week. Income from these plasma donations, combined with money from collecting bottles and cans, is the only source of survival for the two of them. Most of that money goes to milk and food for Sophia. Grace barely eats. Her health is declining rapidly. The tumor shows signs of growth. If she doesn't receive treatment soon, the prognosis is very poor. Nathan closed the file. His hands were shaking hard. For 7 years, he'd lived in silk, a mansion, luxury cars, fine wine. He could buy anything he wanted without thinking. And during those same 7 years, his daughter had been growing up in poverty. The mother of his child had been slowly dying because she didn't have money for treatment. They had been selling blood, digging through trash, sleeping outside, while he lay on feather beds and complained about the emptiness of his life. Nathan Cross, the man who believed he was the most powerful man in the city, was really nothing but a catastrophic failure. He'd failed to save Emma, and he'd failed to protect Sophia, even before he knew she existed. "Boss," Danny's voice came carefully. "Do you need anything?" Nathan opened his eyes, and in them, for the first time in 7 years, there was something other than cold numbness. There was resolve. There was fire. "Get the car ready." Nathan rose to his feet, his voice sharp as steel. "I need to see Marcus. Right now." Marcus Webb had worked for Nathan for 15 years. He was the only man still alive who had known Nathan before Emma was born. The only one who remembered what his boss had been like before grief turned him into a monster. So when Nathan walked into Marcus's office with a thick file in his hand and fire in his eyes, Marcus knew right away something serious had happened. Nathan set the file on the desk and pushed it toward Marcus. "Read it." Marcus picked it up and turned the pages carefully. His face didn't show emotion as he read, but his eyes grew darker with every page. When he reached the last one, he looked up at Nathan, his expression grave. "The nurse from back then, from Emma's hospital," Marcus spoke slowly. "She has a daughter, and you think the child is yours." Nathan nodded, saying nothing. Marcus set the file down, laced his fingers together, and looked Nathan straight in the eye. "Do you have proof? Besides the fact the girl looks like Emma." "She has a photo of me." Nathan's voice was low and rough. "She calls me Daddy. She was born right when Grace and I ended things. And she looks so much like Emma I thought I was seeing a ghost." Marcus went silent for a moment, as if weighing every word he was about to say. "If it's true, if Sophia is really your daughter, then what are you going to do?" "I'm bringing them into my life." "Grab," Nathan answered without hesitation. "I'm going to take care of them, protect them, give them everything they deserve." Marcus exhaled, a heavy breath filled with worry. "You know what that means, Nathan? Bringing a child into our world." "I know. You don't." Marcus stood, walked to the window, and looked down at the city. "We've got hundreds of enemies out there. The Moretti crew is waiting for a chance to take you down. The Russians want their eastern territory back." End quote. "The Mexico cartel never forgot what you did last year when you blew up their deal. And those are only the big ones. There are dozens of smaller ones who'd love to have your seat." Nathan listened in silence. He knew all of it. He'd lived in this world long enough to understand that power always came with danger. "If they find out you've got a daughter..." Marcus turned back to Nathan. "That child becomes a target. They'll use her to threaten you, to blackmail you. I have mated Tuana, to destroy you. You can protect yourself. But can you protect a 6-year-old child 24 hours a day?" Nathan stood and stepped beside Marcus. He looked down at the city, where somewhere in those narrow, filthy streets, his daughter was living a life no child should ever have to endure. 7 years ago, I lost Emma to illness." Nathan's voice was low, steady, certain. "There was nothing I could do to save her. I tried everything. I spent every dollar I had, 80, and I still failed. Because my enemy then was something I couldn't see, couldn't touch, couldn't destroy." He turned to Marcus, his eyes cold as steel. "But this time is different. Sophia is suffering because of poverty, because of her mother's illness, and because I didn't know she existed. Those are things I can change. And if anyone dares threaten my daughter, I'll wipe them out." "All of them?" Marcus studied Nathan, searching for any sign of hesitation. There was none. Nathan's gaze was stone, his resolve steel. This wasn't an impulsive choice. It was a declaration of war. "You mean it," Marcus said. "Not a question. You're ready to go to war with the whole world for a child you only found out existed 24 hours ago." "I'm ready to go to war with the whole world for my daughter," Nathan answered, his voice unshaken. "Emma died and I couldn't do a thing. I won't let that happen to Sophia. Not ever. Ever one." Marcus looked at him a moment longer, then nodded slowly. All right. His voice carried acceptance. If this is your decision, I'm behind you. But we need to prepare. We need to tighten security. We need to send a message to anyone who might try something. I know. Nathan nodded. But first there's something I have to do. Alone. Marcus lifted an eyebrow. What? I need to see Grace. Nathan's voice softened just a fraction. I need to talk to my daughter's mother. It's dragged. Late that afternoon, Nathan parked a few blocks away from the Riverside shelter. He didn't bring Danny. He didn't bring a single bodyguard. This was a meeting he had to face alone, not as a powerful kingpin, but as a man searching for the truth about his daughter. He walked along cracked sidewalks, his expensive leather shoes looking painfully out of place among scattered trash and broken glass. This neighborhood was a different world from anything Nathan knew. No gleaming skyscrapers. No luxury boutiques with bright, shining signs. Only walls stained with mold and damp, windows boarded up with planks of wood, and the tired eyes of people who had run out of hope a long time ago. Nathan had never set foot in places like this. He controlled the whole city from chilled rooms with perfect air conditioning, issuing orders through phone calls and reports. He knew poverty existed, but he'd never truly seen it, never smelled it, never felt the weight of it pressing down on the shoulders of the people trapped inside it. The Riverside shelter came into view like a shabby 3-story building. Paint peeling, roof tiles green with moss. A long line of women and children stood outside, waiting for the evening meal being handed out. They clutched torn bags holding everything they owned. They stared at the ground with the resigned look of people who had gotten used to being abandoned by life. Nathan stopped at the corner and watched. He saw children with hollow cheeks, dark circles under their eyes from hunger and sleeplessness. He saw mothers forcing smiles for their children while their hands trembled with exhaustion. He saw elderly women, bent with age, moving slowly on legs that barely held them up anymore. And then he saw Grace. She stood at the shelter steps, helping an old woman climb. The woman had to be past 70, her legs shaking, unable to make it up the tall stairs on her own. Grace stayed beside her, one hand supporting her back, the other gripping her arm, patient, guiding her one step at a time. She said something to the old woman. The woman laughed, toothless but warm. Nathan stood there, watching Grace do something no one had asked her to do. She wasn't staff. She was just another homeless woman like the rest. And yet she was still helping others, still caring for others, even while she herself was slowly dying from the tumor inside her. It was still the Grace he knew. The woman who always put others before herself. The woman who had cared for Emma with real love, even though Emma wasn't her child. The woman who had given Nathan warmth in his darkest days, never demanding anything in return. Nathan's eyes shifted, searching, and he saw Sophia. The girl sat in a corner of the courtyard, playing with homemade toys. A doll sewn from scraps of cloth, stuffed with cotton pulled from an old pillow. A toy car missing a wheel, replaced with a button. A tiny house stacked from cardboard boxes. Sophia didn't have any of the expensive toys other children had, but she played with those handmade things as if they were treasures. Her face was bright. Her laughter rang out, clean and clear, cutting through the gloom of the shelter. Nathan felt a sharp pain in his chest. His daughter, the daughter he'd never known existed. A child carrying his blood was living in crushing poverty, while he slept on feather beds and ate meals that cost more than an ordinary person made in a month. He had failed her before he even knew she was there. Nathan started toward the shelter, and at that moment, Grace looked up. Her blue eyes met his, and time seemed to stop. Nathan saw recognition flash across her face. He saw shock, and he saw fear. Grace froze in place for a heartbeat, her skin turning pale as if she'd seen a ghost from the past. Then a mother's instinct took over. She turned instantly to find Sophia, moved quickly to her daughter, and pulled the girl close. Her hands clamped around Sophia's shoulders, as if shielding her from an invisible threat. Sophia looked up at her mother, confused. "Mom, what's wrong?" Grace didn't answer. She only stood there, eyes locked on Nathan, her body rigid like an animal ready to fight or run. And Nathan realized Grace was afraid of him. Not afraid of a mafia boss with the power to kill. Afraid of a father who could take away the child she'd sacrificed everything to raise. Nathan stopped a few steps away. He lifted both hands, a gesture of surrender. He needed her to understand he hadn't come to start a war. "Grace. Aska." He said her name with a softness he hadn't used in 7 years. "We need to talk." Grace didn't answer right away. She stood there with Sophia clutched tight in her arms, blue eyes on Nathan with the wary focus of a mother wolf guarding her cub. Around them, other women in the shelter began to notice, whispering to each other as they watched a man in an expensive suit standing face to face with Grace. "Sophia, go inside and find Mrs. Rodriguez." "It's so..." Grace spoke to her daughter, trying to keep her voice calm, but Nathan could hear the tremor underneath. "Tell her Mommy will come in a few minutes." "But Mom, that's Mr. Nathan," Sophia said, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "He helped me yesterday, remember?" "I know, sweetheart." Grace's voice softened when she spoke to her child. "But right now, Mommy needs to talk to him for a little bit. Go inside, okay?" Sophia looked at her mother, then at Nathan, full of questions, but she nodded obediently, hugged her rag doll close, and ran into the shelter. Nathan watched until the small figure disappeared behind the door, then turned back to Grace. No one stood between them now, only two adults facing 7 years of silence, and secrets that had gone unspoken for far too long. "How did you find us?" Grace asked, her voice cold and defensive. "Does it matter?" Nathan replied. "It matters," Grace said, "because it tells me you were watching us. As a climb, you used your power to investigate our lives, and that proves I was right to keep Sophia hidden from you for 6 years." It felt like someone punched Nathan in the chest. She was right. He'd done exactly what she feared. He'd used his resources to investigate, to search, to push his way into their private lives. That was how he operated. That was how a mafia boss solved problems. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nathan asked, his voice dropping. "Why did you hide her for 6 years?" Grace let out a bitter laugh with no joy in it. "Are you really asking me that? You, Nathan Cross, the man who controls half this city, are asking why a broke nurse didn't dare tell you she was carrying your child. I had the right to know." Nathan's voice tightened. "Sophia is my daughter. Sophia is my daughter." Grace shot back, her eyes flashing with a fire Nathan didn't expect. "I carried her. I gave birth to her alone." End quote. "I stayed up all night when she had a fever. I went hungry so she could have milk. I sold my blood so she could have clothes. Where were you for the last 6 years, Nathan? Where were you?" Silence. Nathan had no answer, because he knew the truth. He'd been in his luxury mansion, living the life of a kingpin, while his daughter grew up in poverty. "I was afraid you'd take Sophia," Grace went on, her voice shaking but unbending. "You're Nathan Cross. And 22. You take whatever you want. You destroy whatever stands in your way. If you knew about Sophia, you would have come and taken her. You would have decided a poor nurse with no money wasn't fit to raise the daughter of a mafia boss. You would have used lawyers, money, power, to get custody, and I would have lost Sophia. I would have lost the only thing I have in this world." Nathan wanted to argue. He wanted to say he would never do that, but he couldn't, because deep down, he knew Grace was right. The Nathan Cross of 7 years ago, the man who became a monster after Emma died, absolutely could have done it. He could have taken a child from a weaker woman if he believed it was the right thing. "I loved you." Grace's voice softened, suddenly carrying pain that had been buried for too long. 7 years ago, I loved you for real. I knew who you were. I knew how dangerous your world was. But I still loved you. Because I saw the man inside the armor. I saw the father who loved his daughter more than his own life. I saw a heart that was breaking, even while you tried to hide it. She stopped and drew a deep breath. "But then you left me without a single explanation. One day you were there. The next day you disappeared, like I'd never existed. I hurt. I fell apart. And then I found out I was pregnant." Nathan closed his eyes. He remembered that time. He remembered how he cut Grace off without a word. He remembered how he pushed her away because he was terrified of losing one more person. He'd thought it was the right thing at the time. He'd been wrong. "I was going to tell you," Grace continued. "After Emma's funeral, I was going to come to you and tell you everything. But then I saw you, and I knew the man I loved had died with Emma. You became someone else, Nathan. Cold, numb, terrifying. And 7. I looked into your eyes and I didn't see a father who loved his child anymore. I only saw the mafia boss the whole city feared. And I couldn't bring my daughter into the world of that man." Nathan listened to Grace. And for the first time since he arrived, he truly looked at her. Not with the eyes of a boss measuring an opponent, with the eyes of a man trying to understand the woman standing in front of him. And what he saw made his heart ache. Grace, 7 years ago, had been full of life. Shining brown hair, bright blue eyes, healthy, rosy skin. But the woman before him now was only a shadow of that person. So thin, her collarbones stood out sharply beneath the fabric of her shirt. Her blue eyes were sunken now, surrounded by dark circles. Her skin was pale, drained, like someone who hadn't seen sunlight in a long time. And when she shifted, Nathan saw bruises on her wrist, needle marks from the frequent plasma sessions. She was dying. Nathan understood it with painful clarity. The malignant tumor inside her was quietly stealing her life day by day, and she didn't have the money to treat it. She was sacrificing herself so Sophia could live. "You're sick." Nathan's voice dropped. You have a tumor, and you're not getting treatment. Grace flinched, her eyes widening for a split second before she masked the surprise. You know that too. You really investigated everything. You know I'm dying. Nathan said it flatly, without softening it. You know I sell my plasma twice a week just to keep her fed. You know I go without eating so Sophia can have milk. You know I'm sacrificing everything, even my life, for my daughter. And I can't let that continue. Grace stared at him, anger flashing in her eyes. You don't get to decide anything about my life, Nathan. You lost that right 7 years ago when you walked away. I know. Nathan nodded. I'm not here to claim rights. I'm here because of Emma. The name of his daughter made Grace go still. She looked at him, her expression shifting from fury to confusion. Emma, what does she have to do with this? The last night before Emma died, Nathan began, his voice lowering as if every word carried the weight of 7 years of grief. She woke up and told me something strange. She said there was another little girl who looked a lot like her, and one day I'd find that girl. And scrape, Ma. She said that girl needed me. Grace said nothing, her eyes widening. I thought it was delirium. Nathan went on. I thought it was the morphine. A dying child's hallucination. I kissed her forehead, promised I'd remember, then buried those words with everything I had left of Emma. But yesterday, when I saw Sophia, when I saw a face identical to Emma's, when I saw my photo in her hands, I understood. Emma knew. Somehow, she knew about Sophia before she went. End quote. She left me a message, a prophecy, and it took me 7 years to finally hear it. Nathan's voice cracked on the last words. He didn't cry, but the pain in his voice was so raw Grace could almost touch it. I lost Emma, Nathan said, looking Grace straight in the eye. I sat beside her bed and watched her die a little more every day, and I couldn't do a thing. I failed to save her. I failed to protect her. And that pain turned me into the monster you described. End quote. He stepped closer, his voice firmer now. But Sophia is alive. My daughter is still here, and I'm not going to lose another child. I'm not going to let Sophia grow up in poverty. I'm not going to let you die because you can't afford treatment. What do you want? Grace asked, cautious now. Nathan, what do you want from us? I want to help, Nathan answered. I want to get you both out of here. Get you treated. Give Sophia a decent life. Take Zed. No strings, Grace asked, suspicion heavy in her voice. You're Nathan Cross. You don't do anything without a purpose. No strings, Nathan said. You're my daughter's mother. You deserve to live. Sophia deserves to grow up with her mother beside her. That's the only reason. Grace stared at him for a long time, searching his eyes for any sign of deception. But all she found was sincerity, desperation, and the grief of a father who had already lost too much. How do I know you won't take Sophia when I get weaker? Grace asked, her voice smaller now, more fragile. How do I know you won't use my illness to get custody? Because I've seen how you love her, Nathan said. I've seen how you sacrifice everything for her. Sophia needs you, and I'm never going to take away what she needs. Silence stretched between them. Grace stood there, her thin shoulders trembling, fighting with herself. Logic told her not to trust Nathan, but her failing body knew she didn't have many choices left. 1 week, Grace finally spoke, her voice tired but firm. I'm giving you 1 week to prove you mean what you're saying. But if I see any sign of danger for Sophia, we'll disappear. And this time you won't find us. Nathan didn't waste a single second. That very night, he called Marcus and ordered him to prepare a secure apartment on the Upper East Side. Not an ordinary place, but a penthouse outfitted with the most advanced security system available, with guards on duty 24 hours a day, yet discreet enough that Grace wouldn't feel like she was being held prisoner. The next morning, a black car arrived to pick up the two of them at the shelter. Grace stepped into the car with a guarded expression, clutching Sophia close as if she feared someone might snatch her away at any moment. Sophia was the complete opposite. She pressed her face toward the window, eyes shining as the city slid past. She'd never ridden in a beautiful car like this before. When they arrived at the apartment, Sophia's mouth fell open in amazement. She ran from room to room, touching every piece of furniture, bouncing on the soft sofa, and squealing with joy when she discovered her bedroom had a window overlooking the entire city. Mom, look, Sophia called, thrilled. There's even a park down there. Can we go play in the park, Mom? Grace stood in the middle of the living room, looking around with an expression Nathan couldn't read. She was used to cramped rooms, dark street corners, the back seat of an old car. This apartment was the size of an entire floor of the shelter she'd just left. It was too unfamiliar, too luxurious, too frightening. Nathan stood near the doorway, watching their reactions. He didn't go deeper into the apartment, not wanting to invade the space he'd given them. "The fridge is stocked," Nathan said, his voice gentler than usual. "Someone can come cook every day if you need. And this afternoon, I've scheduled a medical appointment for you at Mount Sinai. The best cancer doctor." Grace turned to look at him, blue eyes carrying too many emotions to name. She wanted to refuse, to say she didn't need his pity. But when she saw Sophia laughing, happy for the first time in months, she couldn't make herself say no. That afternoon, Nathan personally took Grace to the hospital. Sophia stayed at the apartment with a trusted nanny, promised chocolate cake when her mother came back. Grace sat in the exam room, hands clenched tightly together, while the doctor reviewed the CT results and blood work Nathan had arranged ahead of time. Nathan sat beside her, silent, but his presence was a strange anchor Grace hadn't known she needed. "Miss Sullivan," the doctor began, serious but not hopeless. "Your tumor is malignant, which you already know. But the good news is it hasn't metastasized. If you'd come here 18 months ago when it was first found, treatment would have been much simpler. But even with the delay, we can still save you." Grace said nothing. She just sat there, lips pressed tight, eyes fixed on some invisible point on the wall. "We need to operate as soon as possible," the doctor continued. "After that, you may need chemotherapy or radiation depending on the biopsy results after surgery. Recovery will take a few months, but the outlook is very promising. You're young, you're strong, and you've got a reason to fight." The doctor glanced at Nathan, then back at Grace. "I understand you have a little girl. If you want to make it think of her. Think of the years you'll get to be with her if you accept treatment. I've scheduled the surgery for the day after tomorrow." Nathan spoke up, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Dr. Hartley is the top specialist in this field. You'll get the best care." Grace remained silent. The appointment ended, and they walked out of the hospital into a tense quiet. On the drive back to the apartment, Grace sat by the window, looking out without truly seeing anything. Nathan didn't talk. He didn't push. He only drove in silence and waited. When the car stopped in front of the building, Grace finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Why?" Nathan turned to her. "Why are you doing this?" Grace asked. And when she turned her face toward him, Nathan saw tears streaming down her cheeks. The first tears she'd allowed to fall in front of him in 7 years. "I hid your daughter for 6 years. I didn't tell you. I thought the worst of you. 8. Why are you still saving me? Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you punishing me?" Nathan looked at the woman crying in front of him, the woman who had sacrificed everything for their daughter, the woman who had endured 6 years of loneliness and hardship instead of coming to him. He lifted his hand, hesitated for a heartbeat, then gently wiped the tears from her cheek. "Because you're my daughter's mother," Nathan said, his voice low and sincere. "Because Sophia needs you. Eismoyend. Because I owe you more than I can ever repay for what you did to raise her. And because Emma would want me to do this." Grace broke into sobs, the grief she'd held down for too long finally spilling out. And Nathan sat there quietly beside her, feeling for the first time in 7 years that he was doing the right thing. On the 4th and 5th days, while Grace rested in the apartment to prepare for the surgery ahead, Nathan devoted all his time to Sophia. He canceled every meeting, handed all the work to Marcus, and turned his phone off. For the first time in 7 years, his underground empire had to take second place to a 6-year-old girl with eyes identical to Emma's. On the morning of the 4th day, Nathan arrived at the apartment and found Sophia sitting by the window, staring down at Central Park below with longing in her gaze. She'd been asking her mother about that park for days, but Grace was too weak to take her. "Mr. Nathan," Sophia shouted when she saw him walk in. "You're here." Nathan felt something warm spread through his chest when he heard her say his name with that kind of joy. She ran to him, small feet pattering across the wooden floor, and stopped right in front of him, tilting her face up with a radiant smile. "Are you busy today?" Sophia asked, hope bright in her voice. "Mom says you're a very busy person, but I really want to go to the park." I've never been to a real park before." Nathan dropped to her level, and he found himself smiling. A real smile he thought he'd forgotten how to make. "Not today," he said. "We're going to the park, and we're getting ice cream too. What flavor do you like?" Sophia's eyes went wide like marbles, sparkling with delight. "Really? I get real ice cream. I've never had ice cream before." That innocent sentence stabbed straight into Nathan's heart. His daughter was 6 years old and had never tasted ice cream. While he could have bought the entire ice cream shop if he wanted, he swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. "Then today you'll try every flavor." They left the building and walked to Central Park, only a few minutes away. Nathan didn't bring bodyguards. Only Danny followed at a distance, close enough to keep them safe without intruding. Nathan wanted this time to belong to just the two of them, with no one standing between them. Sophia ran along the gravel paths, chasing squirrels, squealing with joy every time she spotted something new. She stopped to stare at the pond, pointed at ducks swimming by, and asked Nathan 100 questions he didn't always know how to answer. Why don't ducks sink? Why are leaves green? Why is the sky so high? Nathan tried to answer each one, and he realized he was enjoying this more than any $1,000,000 meeting he'd ever sat through. They bought ice cream from a cart by the path. Sophia chose strawberry, and she ate it like it was the best thing in the world. Ice cream smeared the corners of her mouth, but her smile was so bright Nathan couldn't help smiling too. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," Sophia declared, eyes shining with happiness. "Thank you, Mr. Nathan." They sat on a bench overlooking the water, Sophia eating her ice cream and swinging her legs. Nathan sat beside her, quietly watching his daughter, feeling something strange inside him, something he thought had died 7 years ago. Peace, happiness, love. "Mr. Nathan," Sophia suddenly spoke, lifting her face toward him with curiosity. "Do you have a kid?" The sudden question froze Nathan for a heartbeat. He looked into Sophia's brown eyes so much like Emma's, and he knew he couldn't lie. "I used to." His voice softened, heavy. "A little girl. Her name was Emma." Sophia tilted her head, the dimple appearing as she scrunched her nose and thought. "Emma, that's a pretty name. How old was she?" Sophia asked with the innocence of a child who didn't understand death. "Where is she? Why doesn't she play with you?" Nathan drew a deep breath. This was the conversation he'd been running from for 7 years. But with Sophia, he wanted the truth. "Emma looked a lot like you," he said gently. "She had eyes like yours. She had a dimple like yours. She liked strawberry ice cream like you." "Really?" Sophia lit up, delighted. "Then is she my friend?" "Definitely your best friend." Nathan smiled, though it carried a deep, quiet sadness. "But Emma went far away, Sophia." "Where did she go?" Nathan lifted his eyes to the blue sky, where white clouds drifted slowly. "She went somewhere very far, a place that's very beautiful. She can't come back anymore." Sophia was quiet for a moment, trying to understand. Then she raised her small hand and took Nathan's hand in hers. "Are you sad?" Nathan looked down at the little hand holding his, and something broke open in his chest. For 7 years, he hadn't let anyone touch him, hadn't let anyone close. But this small hand was melting the ice he'd built around his heart. "I'm very sad," Nathan admitted, his voice trembling. "I miss Emma so much, but I think Emma is very happy that I met you." "Why?" Sophia asked. "Because you're like Emma." Nathan squeezed her hand gently. "And I think Emma wanted me to have someone to love." Sophia smiled, a warm, pure smile that made Nathan want to cry. "Then I'll be your friend," she announced. "So you won't be sad anymore." That night, Nathan sat beside Sophia's bed and read her fairy tales until she fell asleep. He watched his daughter's peaceful face in the dark, and he whispered words he hadn't said to anyone in 7 years. "I love you, Sophia." And he realized it was true. Happiness never lasts very long in Nathan Cross's world. On the morning of the 6th day, just as he stepped out of the apartment after breakfast with Sophia and Grace, his phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. Nathan opened it, and the blood in his veins turned to ice. "Boss Cross has a new family now, does he? Such a sweet little girl. Brown hair, big eyes, loves strawberry ice cream." Attached was a photo. Sophia, holding an ice cream cone in Central Park yesterday. It was taken from a distance, but it was clear enough to see her face, clear enough to deliver a message. "We're watching." Nathan clenched the phone so hard he thought it might shatter in his hand. Rage flared inside him like hellfire, burning away every scrap of peace he'd managed to find over the last few days. They dared to threaten his daughter. They dared to photograph Sophia. They dared to believe they could use his child as leverage. "Danny." 2-8. Nathan's voice came out cold as steel. "Get me to the office. Right now." The car tore through the streets at a ruthless speed. Nathan sat in the back seat, his eyes darkening with a killing intent that smart people recognized and ran from. But the Moretti crew wasn't smart. They'd mistaken Nathan's silence these past few days for weakness. They were going to pay for that mistake in blood. 20 minutes later, Nathan walked into the office where Marcus was already waiting. He threw the phone onto the desk, Sophia's photo still glowing on the screen. Marcus looked down, and his face went pale. "Moretti." Nathan's voice was low, and so frightening that even Marcus felt a chill creep up his spine. "They crossed the line." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll send them a warning. Tell them this is—" "No." Nathan cut him off, eyes like ice. "No warning. No negotiation. Don't give them a chance. Wipe them out. All of them. Before dawn." Ezra let it. Marcus stared at his boss, searching for any sign this was just a burst of anger, but he saw only the cold certainty he'd witnessed a few times in his life. This was Nathan Cross when someone touched what belonged to him, and the ending was always blood. The entire Moretti crew, Marcus asked, just to be sure. We're talking close to 50 men. Nathan, this will start a war with other crews. They'll think you're losing control. They'll think I'm protecting my family. It's start, Nathan answered, his voice steady, unshaken. And they'll learn that anyone who touches Nathan Cross's family won't have a family to go home to. Marcus went quiet for a moment, then nodded. I understand. I'll mobilize everyone. But Nathan, you should stay back. Let me handle it. No. Nathan stood, opened a desk drawer, and took out the gun he hadn't touched in years. I'm going myself. They threatened my daughter. They'll see my face before they die. It's all of us. That night, the city sank into darkness, and Nathan Cross became the Moretti crew's nightmare. He didn't sit in a car and wait for reports like he usually did. He was on the front line, cold and merciless, like death itself coming to collect. They hit the Moretti stronghold from 3 directions. Nathan's people moved like ghosts through the night, fast and without mercy. Gunfire cracked in the darkness, then vanished almost instantly under the hush of suppressors. Moretti's men dropped one by one, not even understanding what was happening. Vincent Moretti, the gang's leader, was dragged from his bed and hauled in front of Nathan. He knelt on the cold floor, fear filling his eyes as he looked up at the man standing over him. Cross, he stammered. We can negotiate. It was only a warning. I didn't mean... Nathan didn't let him finish. He raised the gun, staring straight into Vincent Moretti's eyes with a gaze like winter. You dared to photograph my daughter. You dared to think you could use her to threaten me. You dared to touch what belongs to me. A shot rang out, and Vincent Moretti never spoke another word. Before dawn could break, the Moretti crew had been erased completely. Nearly 50 men, a criminal empire that had existed for 20 years, gone in a single night. The message had been delivered to every crew in the city. Nathan Cross had a family, and anyone who touched his family would die. Nathan returned to the apartment at 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd changed clothes and showered at the office, but he still felt the smell of gunpowder clinging to his skin. He stepped into the living room, intending to go straight to the bathroom and scrub away whatever the night had left behind. But he stopped when he saw Grace sitting on the sofa, waiting. She hadn't slept. Her blue eyes held an emotion he couldn't read. What happened? Grace's voice was gentle, but firm. I know you went somewhere tonight. I heard you talking to Marcus. Nathan looked at the woman in front of him, a woman who should have been terrified to learn what he'd done, yet sat there waiting with a calm that felt almost unreal. Someone threatened Sophia. Nathan didn't soften it. They took a photo of her in the park. They texted me. Grace's eyes widened, fear flashing across her face. Is Sophia all right? No. And have you won't said? Nathan shook his head. And from now on, no one will touch you or her again. I made sure of that. Grace stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand what his words really meant. Then she nodded, accepting without asking for more. Thank you. Her voice trembled, but it was honest. Thank you for protecting our daughter. The 7th day arrived with Grace's surgery. Nathan brought her to the hospital early that morning, Sophia holding her mother's hand the whole way, the little girl's eyes full of worry even though she didn't fully understand what was happening. You're just seeing the doctor, right? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. You're coming back to me, right? Grace knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms, fighting back tears that were already rising. I promise I'm coming back, she whispered. I'll never leave you alone. It's 7 Dodd. Nathan stood beside them, watching the two of them hold each other, and he swore silently to himself that he'd do whatever it took to keep that promise for Grace. If it came to that, he wouldn't let Sophia lose her mother. He wouldn't let history repeat itself. The surgery lasted more than 5 hours. Nathan sat in the waiting room. Sophia curled up on the chair beside him, her head resting on his thigh. At some point, she'd cried herself empty and fallen asleep, her small hand still gripping the hem of Nathan's coat, as if she was afraid he might disappear too. Nathan didn't move for 5 straight hours. He didn't want to wake her. He sat there, one hand gently stroking his daughter's hair, eyes locked on the operating room doors, praying to a God he didn't believe in. The last time he'd prayed like this was when Emma lay in a hospital bed. That time, his prayer hadn't been answered. He could only hope this time would be different. At last, the operating room doors opened. Dr. Hartley stepped out, pulled down her mask, and smiled. The surgery was a success, she said. We removed the tumor completely. She'll need time to recover, but her prognosis is very good. Nathan felt as if someone had lifted a 1,000-pound weight off his chest. He let out a long breath and realized he'd been holding it without knowing. "Thank you, doctor." "Deny." His voice was rough with emotion. "Thank you." Grace was moved to recovery, and Nathan brought Sophia to her the moment they were allowed. Sophia climbed onto the couch beside her mother's bed, too exhausted to stay awake any longer, and fell asleep hugging the rag doll she'd carried from the shelter. Nathan sat by Grace's bed, took her hand in his, and waited. He didn't sleep. He didn't leave. Not for a single minute. He sat there all night, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor, watching Grace's face, pale but peaceful in the drugged sleep after surgery. 7 years ago, he'd sat like this beside Emma. He'd held his daughter's hand all night, hoping and praying. But the next morning, Emma was gone. This time, Nathan wouldn't let that ending happen again. When the first light of dawn began to slip through the hospital curtains, Grace opened her eyes. She blinked a few times, adjusting to the light, then turned her head. The first thing she saw was Nathan, sitting beside her bed, still holding her hand, his eyes red from lack of sleep but fully alert. "You stayed up all night?" Grace asked, her voice hoarse from surgery. Nathan nodded without speaking. "Why?" she asked again. "You didn't have to do that." Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he squeezed her hand gently. 7 years ago, I sat by Emma's bed on her last night. Telver waited. His voice was low, carrying a pain that had never healed. I fell asleep for a few hours, and when I woke up, she was gone. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to hold her hand in the last moment. I won't let that happen again. Grace looked at him, and she saw the man she'd loved 7 years ago. Not the cold mafia boss, not the ruthless killer, but the father who had lost a child. The man carrying a wound that never closed. "Where's Sophia?" Grace asked. Nathan gave a small smile and pointed toward the couch. "She's sleeping right there. She wouldn't go home. She said she had to stay and watch over you." Grace looked at her daughter curled up on the couch, and tears ran down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of happiness. "Nathan." Grace turned back to him, her voice steady even in weakness. "Sophia needs to know who you are. She needs to know you're her father." Nathan looked at her, surprised. "Only when you're ready," he said. "I don't want to force anything on you. I'll wait until you trust me completely." Grace smiled, her first smile since the surgery. "I'm ready," she said. "I've been ready since you sat here all night holding my hand." Grace looked toward Sophia asleep on the couch, then back at Nathan with eyes full of determination. She'd thought about this moment for 6 years, imagined 1,000 different ways to tell her daughter about the father she'd never met. But now that the moment had truly arrived, she realized there was no perfect way, only the truth. "Sweetheart," Grace called softly, her voice still weak after surgery but warm enough to wake Sophia. "Sophia, wake up, baby. Mom has something she needs to tell you." Sophia stirred on the couch, her eyes slowly opening. When she saw her mother awake, she sat up at once, her face glowing with relief. "Mom." Sophia jumped down from the couch and ran to the bed, little hands gripping the edge. "You're awake. Does it hurt? Did the doctor fix you?" "It doesn't hurt, sweetheart." Grace smiled and gently smoothed her daughter's hair. "I'm okay, thanks to Mr. Nathan." Sophia turned to Nathan, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Nathan, for saving my mom. I won. You're the best person I've ever met." After my daddy, Nathan felt a sharp ache in his chest. He looked at Grace, and she gave him a small nod, as if telling him this was the right moment. "Sophia, Mommy needs to tell you something important." Grace took her daughter's hand, her tone serious but gentle. "Do you remember the picture of your daddy that you always keep in your pocket?" Sophia nodded, her hand moving on instinct into her pocket, pulling out the wrinkled photo she'd carried for years, the photo she'd shown Nathan the first time they met on the sidewalk, the photo she treated like her most precious treasure. "I always keep it with me, Mom." Sophia's eyes suddenly went sad. "I know you don't like it when I talk about Daddy, but I miss him. I want to meet him. Consider." Grace drew a deep breath, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry I kept it from you for so long, but now I need you to look at your daddy's picture very carefully. Then look at Mr. Nathan." Sophia did what her mother asked. She looked down at the photo in her hand, then lifted her head to look at Nathan. Back to the photo, back to Nathan. Her eyes grew wider and wider, and Nathan could see the moment the truth began to spark inside them. "Mr. Nathan looks like Daddy," Sophia whispered, confused. "A lot. Like two people who are the same." "Because he is your daddy, Sophia," Grace said, her voice trembling. "Mr. Nathan is the daddy you've been waiting for all this time." Silence. Sophia stood there, staring at Nathan as if her young mind couldn't fully process what she'd just heard. Then she took a step toward him, And another, slowly, carefully. "Are you my daddy?" Sophia asked, her voice tiny, like she was afraid the answer would be no. "My real daddy." Nathan knelt down until he was at eye level with his daughter. He looked into those brown eyes, so much like Emma's, and he knew he couldn't lie to this child for even a second. "Yes, sweetheart." His voice went rough with emotion. "I'm your daddy. Your real daddy. If you frest." Sophia stared at him, and Nathan watched 100 emotions pass through her small face. Confusion, shock, hope, and then a deep sadness no 6-year-old should ever have to carry. "Why didn't you come find me sooner?" Sophia asked, her voice beginning to shake. "I waited for you for a long time. Every night I prayed you would find me. Why didn't you come?" The question pierced Nathan like a blade. He looked at his daughter, the child who had waited 6 years, who had prayed for him every night, who had held his photo like treasure, and he felt something break inside him. "Because Daddy didn't know." Nathan's voice caught. "Daddy didn't know you existed, sweetheart. If I had known, I would have come a long time ago. I wouldn't have let you and your mom suffer for even one day. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I came so late." Sophia looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "But now Daddy knows." Her voice trembled. "So Daddy will stay with me now, right? Daddy won't disappear again, right?" Nathan lifted his hand and gently wiped the tears from his daughter's cheek. "I promise." His voice was firm, like an oath. "I'll never leave you again. Never. No matter what happens. No matter who tries to separate us. I'll always be here. With you. With your mom. Forever. I say." Sophia watched him for one more heartbeat, as if deciding whether she could trust him. Then her lips trembled, and she threw herself into Nathan's arms, wrapping her small arms around his neck with all her strength. "Daddy," Sophia sobbed, the cry of a child who had finally found her father. "I missed you. I missed you so much." Nathan held her tight, feeling her small body shaking in his arms, and when he felt her warm tears soak into his shoulder, something inside him finally broke open. 7 years. 7 years without crying. 7 years of freezing every emotion, burying every pain, turning himself into a machine. But now, with his daughter in his arms, with the word Daddy ringing in his ears, the ice melted completely. Nathan Cross cried. For the first time in 7 years, the most powerful kingpin in the city cried like a child, holding his daughter close and letting the tears fall without restraint. Those weren't tears of weakness. They were tears of release, of love, of a father finally finding his way home. Grace lay in the hospital bed, watching father and daughter hold each other and cry, and she smiled through her own tears. For the first time in 6 years, she knew she'd made the right decision. 3 months passed like a beautiful dream Nathan was afraid to believe was real. Grace recovered fully after the surgery. Color returned to her cheeks, and her blue eyes sparkled with a life Nathan thought had been lost forever. She refused to live dependent on him. She insisted on going back to work, even when Nathan told her she didn't have to. But that was the Grace he'd always known. Proud, independent, and he loved her for it. Grace found a nursing job at a pediatric clinic close to home, where she could keep doing what she loved most, caring for children. Sophia started school at one of the best elementary schools in the city. She adjusted so quickly it surprised both Nathan and Grace. Within only a few weeks, Sophia had a close circle of friends, children her age she could play with, laugh with, and do all the things a 6-year-old should get to do. She didn't have to collect bottles on the street anymore. She didn't have to worry about the next meal. She didn't have to watch her mother grow thinner day by day. Sophia finally got to live like a normal child. Nathan divorced Victoria. He used a massive settlement and political leverage to ensure the senator's family stayed silent, and the process remained clean. The process was faster and cleaner than he expected. Victoria didn't love him. She never had. And she didn't pretend to be sad when he asked for the divorce. They reached a financial agreement they could both accept. And Victoria disappeared from his life, as if she'd never existed. The mansion on the hill was sold. Nathan didn't want Grace and Sophia living in a house filled with ghosts. Instead, he bought a new penthouse, spacious and flooded with light. A place where Sophia's laughter could echo in every corner without being shadowed by painful memories. Every night, no matter how busy he was, Nathan came home. He still ran his empire. He was still the powerful kingpin the entire city feared, but he didn't let the work swallow his life anymore. He came home to have dinner with Grace and Sophia. He came home to hear his daughter talk about her day at school. He came home to read fairy tales to her before bed. He came home to live, instead of merely exist. Tonight was like every other night. Nathan sat beside Sophia's bed, a fairy tale book open in his hands. She lay curled under the blanket, her eyes already heavy with sleep, yet still fighting to stay awake long enough to hear the ending. And then the princess lived happily ever after with her family. Nathan closed the book, his voice gentle. That's the end. Go to sleep, sweetheart. Sophia smiled, her dimple appearing on her cheek. I love you, Daddy. I love you more. Nathan leaned down and kissed her forehead, the way he'd kissed Emma's forehead 7 years before. But this time there was no pain, no desperation, only pure love and a gratitude too deep for words. Sophia closed her eyes, and within seconds her breathing turned steady in sleep. Nathan stayed a little longer, watching his daughter's peaceful face in the soft glow of the nightlight. And in that quiet moment, he thought of Emma, his first daughter, the one he had lost, the strange prophecy she'd left behind on her last night, the long 7-year road of grief and wandering before he found his way home. I found her, Emma, Nathan whispered, barely loud enough to hear. I found Sophia. You were right. You were always right. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for guiding Daddy home. He stood, stepped out of Sophia's room, and gently closed the door. Grace was standing in the hallway, smiling at him. She'd heard what he said to Emma, and there were tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. Nathan walked to her and pulled her into his arms. They stood there in silence, holding each other, listening to each other's heartbeat. Outside the windows, the city was still alive with lights and traffic, but inside this penthouse, there was only peace, only love, only family. Nathan Cross, the most powerful kingpin in the city, had finally found what he thought he'd lost forever. Not money, not power, but a home. A small voice calling Daddy when he walked through the door. The smile of the woman he loved. A second chance life had given him. This story teaches us that no matter how far life pushes us into pain, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. That a parent's love for a child is the strongest force in the world, strong enough to cross any barrier and any distance. That sometimes the greatest losses are the very things that lead us to gifts we never expected. And that family, whether built by blood or by love, is the place we always belong. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it moved you, please hit the like button to support our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily heartfelt stories. Share this video with the people you love, because maybe they need to hear this story too. What did you think of Nathan, Grace, and Sophia's story? Have you ever lived through a moment where you thought you'd lost everything, only to find hope again? Share your feelings in the comments below. We always want to hear the stories and emotions that come from the deepest part of your heart. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace every day. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next video.